Welcome to the International Civil Rights Center and Museum's 2023 Kwanzaa Lecture Series. Habaragani, which means what is the word? The response would be Ujima, collective work and responsibility. On the third day of Kwanzaa, our presenter, Dr. Deborah H. Barnes, is a retired university administrator and a tenured associate professor of English and Africana Studies. She retired in 2015 from Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, where she served as an associate dean and then interim dean of the College of Liberal Arts. Prior to that, she served as associate dean of University Studies at North Carolina A&T State University and director of the Lewis Walker Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnic Relations at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. She earned her PhD from Howard University and has taught at the university level for almost 4 decades. Returning to the classroom in 2016 as an adjunct professor, she has published on the works of Nobel laureate Toni Morrison and numerous other 20th century African American writers. A specialist in curriculum design, she has also authored a bespoke 2-volume textbook on Building Me a Home, an interdisciplinary reader and workbook for the African American experience. On the third day of Kwanzaa, the International Civil Rights Center and Museum is proud to present Dr. Deborah Barnes speaking on the principle of Ujima, collective work and responsibility. To build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together.
Habaragani, brothers and sisters, what's the word? Today is day 3 of Kwanzaa, which means it's Ujima, collective work and responsibility. I'm Dr. Deborah Barnes, a professor of English and African American Studies, and I'm here to bring you the word. Let me begin with the words of Alice Walker in her book, Horses Make a Landscape More Beautiful. And the poem is, First they said we were savages, but we knew how well we had treated them, and we knew we were not savages. Then they said we were immoral, but we knew minimal clothing did not equal immoral. Next they said our race was inferior, but we knew our mothers, and we knew our race was not inferior. After that, they said we were a backward people, but we knew our fathers, and we knew we were not backward. So then they said we were obstructing progress, but we knew the rhythm of our days, and we knew we were not obstructing progress. Eventually, they said, the truth is that you eat too much. Your villages take up too much of the land. But we knew our children and we were starving and our villages were burned to the ground. So we knew we were not eating too much or taking up too much of the land. Finally, they had to agree with us. They said, you're right. It's not your savagery or your immorality or your racial inferiority, or your people's backwardness, or your obstructing of progress, or your appetite, or your infestation of the land that is at fault. No, what is at fault is your existence itself. Here's money, they said. Raise an army among your people and exterminate yourselves. In our inferior backwardness, we took the money, raised an army among our people, and now the people protected, we wait for the next insulting words coming out of that mouth. The Nguza Saba, or the 7 principles, was born a love child of Black liberationists and cultural workers during the Civil Rights era. The young movers and shakers who fostered social change perceived the importance of naming, uplifting, and preserving Black Americans' authentic cultural values as a first step toward liberation. Prior to that, our oppressors, who dominated and controlled defining public discourses, had perennially defamed us as humanly and morally inferior, and therefore undeserving of the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as guaranteed to whites by law. Their mischaracterizations of us have been used to justify our enslavement, oppression, and exploitation, while also denying our human dignity and worth. The new generation of freedom fighters that emerged after the Montgomery bus boycott realized that American apartheid had obscured who and how we were, not only from our tormentors, but also in some cases from ourselves. They understood that English, the language of global oppression, shaped the foundation of social inequity and injustice. Since slavery stripped us of our native languages and histories, we were forced to speak of and therefore think of ourselves in English, which denied the existence of our humanity, agency, and autonomy. Despite this, we knew we were not what they say we were, as Alice Walker notes. So then it became critical for us to find ways to speak ourselves into existence, as well as the previously unarticulatable beliefs, values, and goals that shaped authentic Black consciousness. Freedom fighters understood that the first step in emancipating ourselves from white oppression would begin with nullifying and replacing racist tropes and that spitefully denied our humanity and existential worth. As a result, African-descended people who embraced the zeitgeist of Black liberation and self-empowerment turned to Kiswahili as a language of resistance. In 1966, when Maulana Karenga taught us the Swahili word Ujima, we Black folks already knew all there was to know about collective work and responsibility. We'd been doing it for eons, even before the Ma'afa, the great disaster that separated us from our homelands in Africa. We had certainly been doing it throughout the eras between Reconstruction and desegregation. Refusing to bow to the nullifying ravages of slavery and Jim Crow, Black liberators redefined Black culture by iterating the governing principles that overarched our kinship and communal connection. Central to our understanding of Black reality was its grounding in the collective work and responsibility that is Ujima. In the 1960s, it was common to think of labor as an inevitable function of life. Even our so-called leisure activities were grounded in efforts to create, build, and sustain our life-affirming institutions and organizations. Everybody everywhere worked at something. Leisure was not the personal priority it is today. Collective work was one of the many ways by which we articulated our self-identities and cultural values. The responsibilities of labor provided a means by which we could manifest our love and respect for each other, our communalism. It also connotes the importance of our shared humanity. We engaged each other as extended kin. Using the language of relation, we referred to each other as brother and sister throughout the era. Elders, generally, were honored and revered for their wisdom and lifelong support of the community. Children were valued, protected, and nurtured by the village, which taught them to see themselves as integral to our overarching determination for meaningfulness and impact. This posture of interconnectedness, of solidarity, was so endemic to African Americanity that we didn't even have or really need a word for it. It went without saying. We were, in groups large and small, one people. Our families, communities, schools, churches, and organizations function synergistically for the good of the order, that is, for us all. Accepting our mutual responsibility to care and provide for each other was our thing. It was a Black thing. In our heads, rather in our cultural unconscious, we were one people. We practiced our oneness to perfection, privileging solidarity over independence and honing our connectedness into a superpower that changed history, at least for a while. If you go back and look at pictures from the 1960s and 70s, you'll see what I mean. Black folks loved themselves some Black folks. We couldn't get enough of each other. Every time you looked up, we were gathering somewhere to celebrate and support one another, to acknowledge and cultivate cultural power, or to protest or change our socio-political and economic conditions. We happily worked, played, and resisted together, not yet having internalized the mainstream's opposing cultural value for individualism, competitivism, materialism, and war. That would come later. By the 1990s, we had been granted our wishes to fully integrate the cultural mainstream, beginning with its educational institutions. It was there that we first became immersed in Eurocentric discourses and epistemologies which privileged the primacy of individual desire over the groups. It's media culture which dominates our consciousness today, maintains that individual desire and material acquisition trumps all else. This concept wholly contradicts our communal orientation and thwarts the collective work needed to uplift and nurture the tribe. Many of us now judge our human value by what we have, how we look, the places we've been, forgetting our cultural mandate for mutual affirmation, protection, and support. Having learned to disdain some versions of Black life from the descendants of our former enslavers, we are now less likely to help and more likely to ignore the plight of those to whom we once believed we were connected by blood, heritage, or proximity. How else can you explain the mutual destruction of Black-on-Black crime, rape, murder, suicide, and neglect? How have we abandoned our family, friends, and neighbors to homelessness, hunger, and hopelessness on our watch? These community-destroying outcomes barely existed among us previously. To borrow from the Righteous Brothers, we've lost that love and feeling. We now must harness the power of Ujima to prevent further decimation of Black culture. Kwanzaa was designed to reignite the power of Black consciousness and Black love. It brings us together in celebration of us and what makes us us. Its rituals of healing ensure an annual respite from the toxic swill of racism, sexism, exclusion, intolerance, and unlove which permeates and stultifies mainstream culture. It allows us time to steep in culturally uplifting values, tropes, and memes that sustained our elders and ancestors and empowered them to survive and thrive despite dark periods of violence, torment, and injustice. The principles of Ujima remind us that the revolution, that is, the power to build, change, and transcend the status quo, is in our hands. It sanctifies the dignity of work and consecrates our mutual responsibility for each other. And just like Harriet Tubman, we must leave no one behind. Hence, we are now called to rescue the lost generations of kin who, wandering through the mainstream's matrix on their own, seem to have opted for the blue pill, which unmoors them from the edifying aspects of Blackness, which is to say, their usness. When we celebrate Kwanzaa, we reinforce our human connection. We recognize the beloved community as a fundamental source of Afrocentric power, and we regard communal love as the impetus for social transformation. Today, we celebrate our enduring responsibility to work together in creating a livable world that will support and nurture our sense of oneness with God, the natural world, and each other. Today, we celebrate one of the principles that makes us us. Ujima is the substance of my life. I grew up during the civil rights era and consider myself to be a revolutionary. My family moved here just at the dawn of the lunch counter sit-ins. We attended the church meetings, we marched, we boycotted, we did all the things that made the changes that you enjoy today. I urge you to think of your role in the future and how you'll shape the community of Greensboro, North Carolina, and beyond to ensure that everybody has justice, equality, and peace. As we go forward into the new year, I hope you will reflect on all of the principles of Kwanzaa and think about the ways that you can work together with your family, friends, and community to make us whole again, to make us one again, and to fulfill our responsibility to all of the people out there who need our help. Ashe.
We thank you for joining us on the third day of Kwanzaa. I hope that you were listening really carefully because Dr. Deborah Barnes, she really spoke to how the history and the preservation of African American studies came to be through the movement of the people. Tomorrow, we will have Michael Diamond, who will be speaking on the principle of Ujima, cooperative economics.